Welcome to the first deep dive webinar. Get excited.
Why are all Indian medical professionals so hot?
I don't know, but they're very good looking. It's true.
Disproportionately so. Oh, okay. I'm out here. I appreciate
welcome.
The corset with the scrubs.
So for those of you who are just joining us, this is from the infamous YouTube playlist, the Infodemic Manager playlist, where Infodemic managers from all over the world have contributed all sorts of great music. So we'll drop the link to that in the chat if you need more music in your life.
What if you could?
Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, feel free to log into Slido. Go to slido.com and enter in hashtag Infodemic and join us for our warm-up poll. If you want more great music, check out the Infodemic Manager playlist right here. How's it looking, Tina? Do we have everyone out of the waiting room?
We have everyone connected. Everything's going well.
All right.
Yeah, so we're up to almost 90 at the moment.
All right, let me know when we should switch gears.
Yeah, let's switch over to the party.
We hope you enjoyed that musical interlude as well. Over to you, Tina and to Surani.
So, hi everyone. My name is Tina Purnat. I lead the W2 Infodemic Management team in the Department of Pandemic and Epidemic Preparedness and Prevention. And I'm turning over also to my partner in crime, Surani, to introduce herself.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues from wherever you are joining today. Welcome to today's deep dive. My name is Surani or Surangani Abeyesekera, and I'm with UNICEF with the Demand for Immunization team here in headquarters. So welcome again to this fantastic session that we have lined up for you, and a deeper dive into the Insights Manual, which was launched last week by our directors. I hope some of you participated in the launch and you saw had a sneak preview of all the material and the content that we've developed. So let me not waste too much time. Tina, back to you so that we can kick off the webinar and then we keep talking.
Thank you, Surani. So as you guys noticed, the first webinar is more friendly to our colleagues in Asia and in the Africa and European region. So thanks, Surani and Liz, actually, for continuing the tradition of the Infodemic Manager community events and trainings and joining us this early. So what's in store for us today? We will do a very quick Slido warm-up with Sandra, and following by a click thumb through the Infodemic Insights manual that Surani mentioned. But then the bulk of the hour and a half will be spent discussing with four of our presenters on four different topics that are relevant to our to implementing the work and the process of generating infodemic insights. So we will get to that shortly. So let's first get over to Sandra. And Sandra, do you want to explain Slido, Q&A, and walk us through the first questions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Tina. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon,
good evening from wherever you're joining us. So we have sent some instructions in the chat, but I will still go through them. Please do connect with us in Slido. Log on to Slido on the website. It's slido.com, and you put hashtag Infodemic, just like we're seeing on the screen. And this is where we're going to be putting our responses. First question is, we want to know where you're connecting with us from. So this is where you're going to be putting your questions and we will be responding from there. So please do make use of Slido. So first of all, we want to know where you're connecting from. And we have people from the UK, Egypt, Australia. Continue to put in your responses. We want to know where you're logging in from. This is very exciting. We have people from all over the world. Wow. Gabon, Cameroon, Kenya, France, Australia, Netherlands. Welcome, everyone. Bangkok. More people from Australia. Holland. Keep logging in. South Africa. Wow, this is exciting. The UAE. Every time zone is represented. This is amazing.
I can see Sonia, Netherlands.
Yeah.
Sonia is her own country of infodemic management. So I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Shall we go to the next one?
Yes, please. So the next question is, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten from your parent or your grandparent? So we have some options. Make sure you give it all every time. Oh, someone was told to eat the ice cream. Okay. Life is short. Experience, travel, and enjoy life. I love that. Integrity is important. Some of us can't remember. It's still okay. But this is just to jog our memory. What did our parents or grandparents say? Our very loved ones say to us, take the risks, be respectful always. Exciting. Okay, so we'll continue being logged on to Slido. This is where we're going to be sending in our questions and answers. And if we have any technical questions, we may use the chat webinar, but we prefer that we send all our questions into Slido. Thank you. Over to you, Tina.
Great. Let me just stop sharing. Thank you very much, Sandra. So please do, when you have questions, send them to Slido. We will also, our panelists are going to answer the questions there in case we don't have time to discuss all of them. I'd like to move to a very quick review of the joint WHO and UNICEF manual on how to build an infodemic insights report in 6 steps. Liz, might you have the slides ready? While she's pulling these up, I just wanted to mention, for those of you who would like to learn more about the context, how the manual was developed, and here some practitioners, some from organizations who are doing this type of work already, look up the recording of last week's launch. You can go to the next one, next slide. And the next one. But what I wanted to just jog our memory just a little bit about what the manual's for. We developed it together with many colleagues within WHO and UNICEF, as well as many of you in the global infodemic manager community. And it's basically trying to give us a blueprint on how to integrate different kinds of data sources to generate infodemic insight reports. And this type of rapid analysis of people's questions and concerns and attitudes and perceptions can then help inform rapidly an emergency response or response of a health program, like an immunization program, during immunization campaign or during EFI, etc. And of course, then all of these insights can then inform the adaptation of the outbreak or emergency response when situation and narratives are rapidly evolving. Next slide, please. We added this QR code to download the insights report onto your computer. If you Google it, you can also find it on the UNICEF and the WHO website. It's very rich document. In its core, it describes the 6 steps from choosing the question that an infodemic management insights report can answer, all the way down to collecting and analyzing the data, and then disseminating and using the reports. There's many different components to it. It's not only an accompanying workbook. If we go to the next slide, there's even several accompanying teaching e-learning courses that are already now available in English. The one on the insights report is just next week also coming out in French and Spanish. And what is also useful for practitioners, because we all work in different operational settings and in different public health contexts, the appendices. So here you see 5 appendices that allow you to very quickly apply the insights manual process to analyzing the context on zero-dose children, for example, or applying it to polio outbreaks and campaigns, seasonal influenza vaccination, or vaccine safety events, or, for example, to inform planning for mass gatherings to prevent outbreaks. So if you go to the next slide, really the way that we see the manual is a bit like a recipe for cookies, and it really provides instructions on the basic ingredients and the basic process on how you assemble these ingredients, but then you can customize it to add flavors and different toppings to your taste and to your operational context. So we will discuss this also in today's webinar. The manual is there to be used, to be adapted. We'd be very happy to hear from you. Both Surani and I are keen to also understand how this will be applied by all of you in different operational contexts, and how we can improve it next time around. So this speed of analysis is really important, because when narratives shift and change on the topics, then we need to understand what's driving them and how we best respond. And this is the key and the objective of a lot of infodemic manager tasks. I will stop here, actually. Maybe we stop sharing the screen, and we actually dive in. We would start first with the first topic and the first panelists. Terri Senft, she's joining us from Australia, Macquarie University. She's well known to the infodemic manager community. She's been part of every single training, the global training that we've delivered, speaking to us on a variety of topics. And today we asked her to provide us an introduction on ethical considerations in generating infodemic insights. Now, before we go to the topic, Terri, we prepared one question to the community, to the participants, on what do they think are the biggest issues in ethics and infodemic management, and if they had any examples. So maybe we run through really quickly. So sometimes people share wrong information based on good intention. And Terri, what do you think? What do you see on this? People left the basic thing, live the fact and truth. Example, lungs work to provide the oxygen to the body, but people keep inhaling tobacco even during the pandemic. Cultural beliefs, virtually no ethics teaching in pre-graduate medical school. keeping confidentiality, data accessibility, patient data. So, Terri, what do you think? Over to you.
So, hi, everyone. Great to be here with hopefully some unicorns of past, but also just anybody who wants to swing by. So these are some great questions, and I love that they're a bit all over the show. I feel like we can tackle some of them after I give you a bit of a talk, because hopefully some of the things I say will touch on some of the questions that you're raising and then bring up maybe some more questions as well. I have to say, out of all of them, my favorite was something along the lines of, why should someone be listening on my conversations? I think that is a fantastic place to start. And it is the answer from our perspective, right, would be in the interest of protecting public health and safety. That would be a reasonable justification for listening or reading in on public, and hear me, public conversations. So let me jump to slides, because I want to make sure that I am dialoguing with the fantastic manual. Hopefully somebody has posted the slide, a link to the slides in the chat. I'm going to go, unfortunately, New York style, quickly. And for anyone who wants to sort of look over things or catch up later, the slides are right there for you. So a quick agenda. I only have 10 minutes to talk at you. So we're going to do a quick refresher of those 6 steps that Tina just went over. And by quick, I mean, I'm going to show you a picture. Then we're going to move to a summary of each of those steps and dig a little more deeply into some ethics to-do guidance around those. I'm then going to briefly mention an effort that's ongoing to develop ethical guidelines around social listening practices, particularly for infodemic managers, and then give you a couple of links where you might be able to look for more guidance. So there we go. If you go to the manual on page 2, this is what you would see, this little staircase, and it has all of these steps that Tina just went over. I'm going to drill into each of them. We're going to start with step 1. So the first step, sorry, there's a lot of pop-ups. The first step that the manual goes into is choosing a research question and a population that you want to focus on when you've got a health sentiment question that you're trying to look into. So they say things, if you look at the top, guidance from Infodemic Insights Manual, and I always tell you where you can find what I'm talking about. So they say things like, make sure you define the population that you're trying to study and the question of concern. They also say things like, choose a topic that's experienced change, so you can think about directionality in analysis, like investigating a spike in demand for antibiotics despite recommendations against antibiotic use. They talk about identifying a gap that you're trying to address in the question. And they talk about how important it is to think about a question that could be addressed by a public health intervention. Now, I want to add 2 important additions to that. If you are working, and this is under ethics-related additions, if you are working with a population that is potentially at risk, so that might be minors, that might be groups who are under domestic or other sorts of duress, people who are living in wars or places in conflict, what you want to do is run an assessment of the risk, the harms, and the benefits of the study that you're trying to propose. I have a link here of a great tool that US Global Pulse developed that you can use. You also want to check out to see if your organization has an organizational ethics review board. Some places do, some places don't, and you want to abide by their guidelines. You might also need to check for national level ethical review board requirements if you're working with an organization that isn't local to the population that you're trying to study, okay? Again, happy to talk more about this next. So step 2 would be designing your data collection plan. So you figured out your group and you figured out the question you want to ask. Now you're trying to figure out how we're going to collect data to start addressing this question. So the guidance says aim for more than 5 regularly recurring data sources in your insights report, and at least 3 of those should examine a specific population, right? So you don't want to be talking about teenagers, but you're looking at, say, Twitter, and you're not able to contain it for age. They also say, do remember that you don't have to do all the data collection yourself. Actually, it's preferred that you use routinely collected data sources that already exist. The manual is really great about walking you through that process. Here are some ethics additions I want to add. I just said it before, I will say it again. You collect data online from publicly viewable accounts only. You need to be respecting the fact that while they're on social media, people have an expectation of privacy, even if they're saying something public. That means data collected from social media platforms need to originate in publicly viewable accounts, not private, not friends only, not otherwise restricted. If some company comes to you and says they have some sort of magic bullet that they can suddenly read private WhatsApp messages, it doesn't matter, because that's not ethical practice. No matter how much you want that data, that might be different in cases of national security. That's a whole other conversation. Okay, do arrange for data security. So you need to determine who's going to take responsibility for safely storing, sharing, and after your study ends, deleting that collected data and conducting regular audits to see that those processes are being honored. You also need to, during the data collection, you need to be doing or accounting for any information that contains personal names or locations or identifying images. And you need to do what we call de-identifying them. That means delete or blur any kind of names or faces, even things like profile icons. That's how you protect expectations of privacy. I'll talk more about that when we get to the publishing the report part. Now, when you're developing your findings from your analysis of that data, the guidance says consider things like risk in terms of spread and velocity of a certain belief or feeling. And then also remember that every country and health authority is going to have a different set of definitions and objectives and priorities with regard to tolerances for risk. Places that are dealing with limited resources or in conflict have very different understandings of how risk operates than other kinds of places. Again, the manual is amazing for detailing this kind of stuff. The ethics related additions I would make are as follows. First, do anticipate requests from government agencies unrelated to public health that might want to collaborate with you or share data you have collected. Bear in mind that agencies associated with law enforcement, national security, military, or other fields may interpret risks and benefits in ways that can at times conflict with public health understandings of those terms. And then also do anticipate requests from private companies to collaborate with you or share data. Bear in mind that the prime mission of any company is to sell products to consumers. This caution especially applies to collaborations with social media platforms who may offer perks like access to their platforms or storage facilities, right? With possibly the long-term intent to repackage public health related findings as marketing data, which they then may sell to third parties. Now we're going to move to creating strategies and recommendations. So the guidelines say, do consult subject matter experts to help you develop those recommendations, do stick to your organizational mandate, and do try to address multiple stakeholders prioritizing strategies that can be immediately implemented. Here are some ethics additions I would make to that. First, do make a concerted effort to consider representation and equity as you search for subject experts. An expert in digital security is not necessarily an expert in, say, Indigenous community issues, but both experts might have valuable things to contribute to a discussion about how to better encourage local people to lodge questions and complaints about vaccine access over a digital helpline. They're coming at it from different angles. The second thing is, do bear in mind that subject experts can and should at times disagree on strategies to implement recommendations. It is possible to concede mixed expert viewpoints exist and still deliver a clear strategy recommendation to best address the needs and gaps of a particular community you have just studied and are trying to serve. We're almost done. Creating the insights report. So the manual says generate insights reports with data that's no more than 2 weeks old in general. And then they have specific sections of the report that you want to include. Realize that the readers are going to be pressed for time. I would add, do have your methods section of your report proofread by a layperson. Scientific rigor requires that somebody collecting and analyzing data using your methods will wind up with findings similar to yours. If your methods are poorly communicated, it becomes difficult to trust the report's recommendations. We don't even know how you got to the conclusions you got to. Secondly, do ensure that all of your reports omit all instances of personal identity disclosure. Again, keep in mind, with the exception of public figures like politicians or adult celebrities, not child celebrities, or adult influencers with more than 10,000 followers, those would be public figures. Everyone else who posts online does not expect to be personally identified in government reports, including personal identifiers of any version in an insights report, whether it's externally circulated, an internal, a draft version, some notes you're sending to somebody else online, is both unnecessary and breaches public trust. A post that strikes you as low risk can cause someone else grave harm in the wrong hands, especially where military, police, or domestic surveillance is high. Lots of people have stalking cases out and domestic violence cases. You don't want to aid and abet somebody intending harm. Finally, do remember, if your insights report launches in a forest and there's no one around, the report is not going to make a sound. So ask people how they want to get reports from you. Sometimes they want a website, sometimes a message on WhatsApp, and so forth. The ethics-related addition to this I would make is, do approach stakeholders formally and informally to discuss whether the insult reports are actually helping them to do their job. Ask their thoughts about the reporting and dissemination process and about the usefulness of the reports themselves. Remember that the primary objective is not to generate insights reports, even ones that get read. It's to best assist stakeholders to promote positive health behaviors in the communities they belong to and serve, right? That's what we're here for. So I have a slide here of more guidance, and it is also included in the Insights manual. There are some links you can check out. And if you look at the link I provided on the slides, you are more than welcome to check out the little article that they've written about the expert panel. We've been deliberating all of these issues, working on developing a cohesive set of guidelines. It is very much in a process, but we are very interested in hearing from people on the ground who have specific in situ issues that they've been wrestling with, and they wish somebody would have some published guidance on it. So definitely feel free to reach out to me or Tina if you have those kinds of burning desires. Otherwise, you can just send me cat pictures. It's all good. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Thanks, Terri. That's a great overview, and thanks for the shout out to the ethics panel. We convened this together with our public health ethics unit, where we're looking more into the ethics developing an ethics framework for social listening and infodemic insights. Liz, I'm getting fading in and out internet connection. I wonder if you could help me co-moderate this. So everyone, this is Liz Wilhelm, who co-wrote also the manual with me, formerly of UNICEF, now of IFL Brown. Liz, can I take it over, give it over to you?
Sure. So this is a great, strong first presentation on all things ethics. There's a lot more where that came from, I know, since Terri has been thinking deeply about ethics and social listening for quite some time. And so again, if you have a question for Terri, you can go to the audience Q&A tab in Slido and ask your questions. So someone is asking a question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you, from an ethical perspective, how do you do this? So someone asked, curious to know what should be the turnaround time to develop and share usable insights up the food chain, especially when a fast-moving outbreak is unfolding. So how do you balance this need for speed and speedy insights with the fact that you really need to be diligent about the data you're collecting and how you're analyzing it and presenting it? Any advice?
This is such a fantastic question. I think it exists at a bunch of different levels, right? If you are, I know that at places, for instance, like the CDC, there are sort of, I call them hurdles of clearance. One must pass in order to release information at certain levels, let alone act on that information with interventions. So, your organization may have its own hurdles of clearance, and I think those are really important to be aware of and to troubleshoot as far ahead as you can upstream. So, for instance, I was lucky enough to do some work with a bunch of CDC sort of experts in figuring out the system, and they knew a lot of the language that clearance wanted to see was boilerplate. So they got all of that ready. And then the minute we would hit the findings, it would be like, bam, they would send it for clearance. And so a lot of the delay that we can sometimes see is often something we contribute to, because we get started once we have our results. But a lot of you know what you're going to get asked by your bosses, and you could be preparing a lot of that kind of language. And then the minute you get the insights you want to take action on, you plug that in, you send it off. You can also flag to people on those kinds of committees that this is in the pipeline, and it seems to me that there's a lot of internal conversations about things of different levels of urgency. I also know when we did Infodemic with the unicorn stuff, a lot of folks were talking about how if they were in emergency situations or particular areas, they had clearance to move faster in a kind of a triage way on certain acts. So it really does become a calculus of harms, risks and harms. And this is where a risk assessment can be super, super interesting and important, because it can flag for you things you might not have even thought in terms of potential risks and harms. And you can say, okay, is the public good of treating this issue? Are we willing to roll the dice, against these potential harms? And sometimes the answer to that is yes, we need to. And sometimes it's not so much. I hope that answers the question. I wish that there was a set answer. These things are super contextual, at least in my experience, they are.
Well, thanks for that, Terri. Tina, did you have a reflection as well on this question?
Yes, although tell me if I will try to speak slowly. Sorry, everyone, my internet is unstable, and let me know if I should stop talking. So I will give you an example about the turnaround time. Actually, all of the points that Terri raised need to be considered. You can actually speed up your own turnaround time if you do prepare in advance. But for example, during the pandemic, our team at some point was doing analysis every week. and already sharing reviewed and then shared preliminary reports with the response team on a weekly basis. It was very curtailed. You have to and limited. There's a limitation on what you can do on a quick turnaround, but when, for example, narratives and questions are changing, there's an added value in informing decisions rapidly than trying to make a perfect all-encompassing analysis. In other situations, we turned around in 2 weeks' time, where of course there's a difference also between what is prepared for an internal decision making versus what may be, for example, published. And this is where, for example, additional layers of clearance and review are needed, which is what Terri also referred to. The turnaround time will depend on the context you're working in. So sometimes infodemic monitoring is useful also for in routine time or in preparation, for example, for an immunization campaign, for example, or something that you know that you could inform your routine work, or for example, preparation for the next seasonal influenza season, etc. Over to you, Liz, on this one.
Great. Okay, then maybe we have time for like maybe one more quick question. Terri, what advice do you have for people who are investigating infodemic issues related to particularly vulnerable communities, particularly communities that might be facing stigma? So like one recent example has been mpox, so monkeypox, and how it affects LGBT communities. There was stigma early on in the COVID-19 response around Asian communities being particularly affected by racism and stigma. So we know that there's sometimes a lot of other social harms related to conversations about these topics. So what advice do you have for people who are doing infodemic management, who are thinking through how do we do social listening thoughtfully and ethically in these populations where they might be facing some of these social challenges?
That is such an awesome question. A lot of times we'll focus on the we call them subjects or participants, the people we're trying to study. And that makes sense, right? But I'm going to suggest a different approach, which is early, start your focus on gathering experts, gathering people with a lot of field knowledge, and from all like mind map the different ways somebody might be an expert on queer identity and stigma, on stigma and social communication, on, just map it out, and then begin those dialogues, because we talk about experts informing, being sort of people we go to get ideas about strategies and recommendations once we have our findings, but experts give you better ways to search to get responses to the questions you want asked. So I'll give a quick one. When I was working with kids with CDC stuff, the standard approach that they had been asked a lot of times was, "Hello, youth, how do you feel about immunization?" Right? And they'd be like, I guess it's okay. And if you instead showed up with some meme or challenge that was going on in TikTok that was about, say, fears over vaccines and adolescent immunization, and you went, have you seen this? Like, what do you think about this? Is this something that you would laugh at or circulate or whatever? Then suddenly the kid is like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And all this amazing information comes out of that. And those kinds of approaches to getting at a question, I wouldn't have even thought about that, except that I talked to a lot of people who watch TikTok. And so I guess a short version of this is cast as wide a net as you can for equity reasons around the concept of expert, and get experts on your team early. they can also help you make networks to push any proposed initiatives forward.
That's great advice. Well, thank you so much, Terri. And so if people still have questions for Terri, put them into the Slido, and maybe we can have Terri log in and also be able to respond to some of those. So if you got more burning ethics questions, she's your woman and she'll be available to take your questions. And so now let's go back to our Slido where we actually have a question here. So do you want to kind of reflect on this, Tina, and introduce our next speaker?
Yes, so I'm projecting the next question as a segue to the next segment, which will deal with how to build and use taxonomies for social listening in infodemic management. And we actually have a bit of a split, as you can see here in the audience. So it's actually a good that we put this on the agenda. We've invited Becky White. She's a consultant in the WHO Infodemic Management team, but also an expert in digital health, in health promotion, and infodemic management overall. So I would invite Becky, who we've asked to speak about how to build and use social listening taxonomies in infodemic management, to maybe start with a talk, and then we go into Q&A. Over to you, Becky. Welcome. You're muted still.
We were just talking about people being on mute. Thank you so much, Tina. I'm thrilled to be here. Just checking that you can see my screen, everybody.
Can we put it on, Becky, can we put it on full screen?
How's that?
So that's great.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. It's great to be here. It was great to see that there was a couple of people in the chat who had worked with taxonomies before. So I'm really interested to hear your experiences in the Q&A as well. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about public health taxonomies for social listening, what they are, how they might be useful, and give a couple of examples of development and use at WHO. So I've been involved in social listening and infodemic analysis during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've used public health taxonomies to support that work. So to start with, what is a taxonomy? So in this context, a taxonomy it's basically a system or a classification structure that allows you to align your search strategy. So it can help you to organise intelligence and map what areas of a public health topic where information might be most concentrated, but also where information voids are, where conversations seem to be missing, or where new topics and concerns are emerging. And this map or this taxonomy will likely change between insights reports as you move along. And this is why taxonomies have to be living documents and should be updated and updated regularly and reviewed. So I guess in this context, it's important to remember that taxonomies are for classifying conversations. They're not epidemiological. So the focus is on how people are talking, what they are saying, rather than classifying disease, because people don't really talk about their illness the same way that a medical doctor or an epidemiologist would. We can use taxonomies for automated data collection or for organising data in manual analysis, so things that have been collected offline and online, and looking at ways of bringing them together. Why can't I move on? There we go. And so why is it useful? And so we know with an infodemic, it's an overwhelming amount of information. And this is true for the analyst as well as for the end user. So when you think about the data that we're collecting, it really can be a vast amount, looking at social and news media data and community data as well. And we need a way of being able to bring that together to find patterns in a coherent and practical way to be able to quickly identify those concerns, questions, and information voids. And a taxonomy supports this by providing a structure so you can filter data and quickly see what's happening. It also allows an analyst to look at velocity. So that's where conversations are rising, as opposed to just looking at overall data volume. So as an example, during COVID-19 reporting, conversations about the vaccine were really prominent at times, contributing to a lot of data volume. But because we were using a taxonomy, we were still able to see where data was rising and where there might be concerns or things we needed to have a look at in different categories as well. So I mentioned that we have used taxonomies in COVID-19 and in mpox during the health emergency. So I'm going to show you just a couple of examples of how we have used them. So this was the taxonomy that we developed for COVID-19. So if you look, you can see that it was developed across the 5 overarching topic areas of the cause, the illness, the treatment, the interventions and information, with the subcategories being used to further expand those areas. And this basic framework has been used in other taxonomies. So we used this for the production of the weekly Infodemic Insights reporting and in the WHO EARS platform. Okay, so with the weekly intelligence reporting, so this is weekly digital intelligence where news and social media data were categorized to a taxonomy. And we can see here, this is actually a really good example because we can see on the bottom right how overall volume of data around COVID-19 was really big, but we actually had rising topics if you look at the main screen within the other categories. And then descriptions from within each of the categories allowed us to kind of understand a little bit better what data was being captured in there. So as Tina said, rapid dissemination and kind of rapidly understanding was really important. And with the COVID-19 reporting, these summaries of the digital data were sent out through our network groups really rapidly. So this one was the 13th to the 19th of April, and this was sent out on the 22nd of April, so 3 days later. So there was quite a quick turnaround. We then looked at this digital intelligence data and we looked at it with other data sources, and it was triangulated by a human analyst. And then we applied it to a risk matrix on the left here. And so this looked at the key themes by the dimensions of reach and dissemination, but also by potential public health impact. And then the final impact was that we used all of that information that we generated to develop some recommendations for internal use. Okay, and this is the WHO EARS platform. We also had a taxonomy that we used in EARS where artificial intelligence, so machine learning, was used to scrape data and to categorize it to categories. The platform gives visualizations of data where it might be rising, which categories geographically, for example. And there was different features in the platform that added context, including key terms, gender, and that kind of thing to help an analyst to be able to have a look and see what was happening. So importantly then, a human analyst could go in and have a look at this and start combining it with other data, doing integrated analysis, identifying narratives that were occurring, and look at starting to contextualize some of the findings. So how do you develop one? Luckily, there's some excellent guidance in the new Infodemic Insights report. So we have recently been working on a new taxonomy for respiratory pathogens, and we have followed the steps that are set out in the Insights report. There's a range of different questions to help guide thinking on what the subtopics might be. And so the first one is, what is the public health issue? And really defining what the public health issue was really important with the respiratory pathogen work, because it was much broader than looking at mpox or COVID-19, where it was just one pathogen. The other questions that the Insights report guides you through are in relation to guidance and population behaviour, as well as the information environment. And the report considers taxonomy development over those 5 areas that I showed earlier with regard to the COVID-19 taxonomy. So looking again at the cause, the illness, the treatment, the interventions, and then information, conversations about information. And then using the questions that have been identified in the report to start pulling out those subtopics that are especially aligned to your health issue. The report contains a really useful sample taxonomy across the 5 areas with the topics and the subtopics, and really importantly, the notes for analysts, which give that context of what is included, what might be included in each category, and starting to build some of the keywords. And I think it's really important again to look at it that this is a starting point. So taxonomies do change. It's really important to keep looking at them as you go through. And with the keywords, you'd be looking at how people talk about their illness, how they are talking about the virus. So rather than something like myalgia, for example, people might be talking about sore muscles, that kind of thing, and that would guide your search strategy with your keywords. Excuse me. Okay, so my final slide, a couple of do's and don'ts, examples just from some of the work that we have done. I've mentioned a few times with taxonomies, it's really important to plan for reviewing and iterations of the taxonomy categories, yes, but also of the keywords, the data sources where you're getting your data from, and the search strategy. To look at velocity of the conversations as well as the volume. Identifying different questions, concerns, information voids, and circulating narratives, as well as how it might be crossing over with other topics is really interesting to pay attention to. Again, so looking at vulnerable populations, stigma, and inequities, and to compare analysis over time to identify where things might be changing and what new topics might be coming out. So don't just set, with the don'ts, don't just set and forget. Really important from early on in health emergencies when there's so much information and conversations, questions that are emerging. Look beyond the high engagement posts. So look to find the narratives within the data, not just the issues that are being shared the loudest and the widest. Look beyond, the content of conversations is really important, but look to understand how people are reacting to it. So are they angry? Are they confused? Have they got questions? Like, how are they actually, what kind of sentiment is being produced in the content that they're talking about? And visuals are really important. There's a lot of conversation that's expressed visually. And so looking at ways of being able to work with and understand memes, GIFs, emoji, and images can be really important to understanding the conversations that are happening. And then don't forget to update the keywords as the language drifts over time. And again, with COVID-19, there was so many examples of things that probably at the start of the pandemic, we would never have, we didn't know that things like social distancing, the epicurve, Miss Rona, these words were going to become so commonly used. And so it's really important to keep looking at how people are talking and update the taxonomy and the keywords as you go through. So that's me. I think I have definitely kept the time. I'm going to leave you, there's a couple of resources here from WHO that are already available, and then a couple that we have coming soon. And if you are not already signed up to the newsflash, there's a link there where we would share when things do become available. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Becky, very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we got you.
Okay, sorry. Actually, go over to Liz. There's several questions in Slido.
Oh, so good job, everybody, in putting your questions in Slido. We have several. So Becky, maybe we'll take a few. So one person was asking, how can we be gender sensitive in a taxonomy? So how might you consider gender related issues in taxonomies or word choices, or how we're thinking about categorizing narratives? Any advice? And why might it be relevant? Maybe it'd also be helpful to hear from you. Why do you think that might be relevant for public health?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. There are different ways of doing it. So with the EARS platform that I showed you, they used AI to generate, and there was a filter in there which looked at how people were identifying, and it used some different information to do that, but it was very approximate and it was a smaller data set. Well, that's with digital analysis. Obviously, when you're looking at applying community data, it can be a bit easier if you're doing focus groups with particular groups, with women's groups, with men's groups, with young people and older people. And then you can use that data to pull into a taxonomy. And I think it can be really important because there are sometimes specific issues which are, we're taking a gender lens is is really useful. And so some of the things that I'm thinking of, which are quite obvious, but that we did see during COVID-19 was concerns about breastfeeding and pregnancy in relation to COVID-19 vaccines, and being able to kind of pull that data out and look at it is really important, because in some instances women's voices online can be they are not as representative as men, and so it's same with how the taxonomy allows you to look within the different categories. Being able to isolate voices that might not be as loud but are still important can give some really good data.
That's a great answer. So there's one question here which I think is interesting. So someone is basically making a comment. Has anyone asked in these kind of interventions specifically what the public considers or feels is fake news or misinformation, what is authentic? So not necessarily maybe what we might categorize as misinformation or credible information, but how the public perceives a particular piece of guidance or information and whether or not they see it as true or accurate. Can you comment on that a little bit about perceptions of information, of health information or misinformation, and how you might capture that in the taxonomy as well?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think, and sometimes it's really hard because is something misinformation in what might be misinformation in one geographical area might be actually true in another. So we might have where recommendations are different, where there's different advice and that kind of thing. And so it can be it can be a tricky area. So we, within the taxonomy, so how we would work with that, or how we did, is that specific pieces of misinformation around a topic. So if it was around a vaccine or around a reduction in movement, so a lockdown, or that would be categorized into that data would be put in the topic where it fits. And then we had a meta category, that information one at the end, where we captured conversations which about broader mis and disinformation. So people might be talking in that category about, or we might capture data in that category about the ways that governments were dealing with misinformation, the ways that social media platforms were dealing with it, how people felt it was impacting much more broadly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a great answer to the question. And then maybe there's a kind of like an emotional plea for a cry for help also emerging from, I think, the Q&A. And the last someone was like, do you think this type of work can be done by us mere mortals, or do we all need PhDs to do this? Do you have any advice for anybody who feels like you need a PhD to do this kind of work?
No, you don't need a PhD to do this kind of work. I think that's one of there is lots of different ways of doing taxonomies, of developing them and implementing them as well. And I think that's one of the real benefits, or the real gems in this Insights Manual, is it's written for people who are new to infodemic management. So who might have there's useful information in there if you're really new to it, or if you've been working in it a long time. There's lots of practical steps to help, including, as I said, there's a draft taxonomy in there that you can go in and have a look at and then start building your own on. But no, you absolutely don't need to be an expert to look at starting to work with some of this stuff. And we do have, there's a couple of things that the team have been working on, which will be available, which will be more useful as well for people.
Well, thank you so much, Becky. There's actually a bunch of questions that have come through, so do go to Slido and see if you can take some time to answer some of them. There's a lot of good questions that have come through. But in the interest of time, we want to move to our next wonderful speaker, which Surani is going to introduce us to. So over to you, Surani.
Now, I'm not going to take too much time to introduce Kiki. Kiki has been working in this field with us for a long time. She's been in the infodemic community and in part of our trainings in the past as well. So she has a vast experience in dealing with this work and did some really interesting work with us in the last couple of years, working with on a fantastic project, looking at insights generation and testing on real time and all that. So Kiki, back over to you, and let's listen to what you have to say.
Thank you, Surani, and thank you, Liz, Tina, and all the panelists.
We have we wanted to introduce to you, Kiki, the audience and their experience with SBC digital interventions. Can I just run through really quickly? Is that all right?
Sure, sure.
So we asked them, what social behavior change interventions have you tried in addressing infodemic harms? And I think you'll see there's quite a lot of experience. So sanitary educational articles, promote demands, communication between health provider and clients, family, couples communication, drama, which I think theater, community drama. So also promoting vaccine confidence, fact checking, better community outreach, advocacy, community engagement. A lot of colleagues from the vaccine demand community, community engagement, behavioral insights, audio drama, health education. So there's actually quite a lot of experience, and thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing your experience and the wisdom you want to impart on us from your experience. Over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Hello, everyone. My name is Kiki. I'm from Indonesia, UNICEF Indonesia country office. So today, I would like to share some of the work that we did on infodemic management as part of our RCC response, based communication and community engagement for COVID-19 response. We learned a lot from all the panelists here today. We tried to do some of the things and implement it, and we really would like to see and hear your thought, your input and feedback, how this infodemic management being implemented at the country office with all the limitation, with all the resource, with all the challenges that we have. So I will share my screen. I hope this is the right one. Okay. Can you see the slide?
Yeah, you just have to put in a presentation mode. Perfect.
Thank you. So the title is Social Behavior Change Intervention. The guide is the Connecting Social Listening Insight to Developing SBC Intervention. To be honest, I'm not sure whether the presentation that I'm going to present are really consistent with the title, but I'm going to try my best. But the idea is really to share our experience, our lessons, and some of the initiatives that we did around infodemic management. I want to highlight that this is really a collaborative work between UNICEF, WHO in Indonesia, and also the RCCE working group. There are a lot of TSO, including religious organization, government, academia, and also some partners, civil society organization who has been doing this work far before UNICEF started to doing it in Indonesia. Colleagues from Mafindo, colleagues from ICT Watch, please allow me to share some of our work today. Okay. Actually, our first experience with doing the social listening for routine immunization program started back in 2014 when we work with the UN Global Pulse. They have the office in Jakarta. We call it Pulse Lab, basically to understand public perception of immunization using social media. This is the report. I can share the report with you. Very interesting because we understand from the social listening exercise that fever is still one of the main factor for parents and mother and caregiver not to bringing their children for routine immunization. From this exercise, we also get insight that there are some influential people on social media that people really listen to when it comes to routine immunization. So it's a very interesting exercise. And since then, we really trying to dig more data from social media to basically understand public perception on routine immunization. Just to give you a bit of context about our country, this is the map of Indonesia. I hope all of you have a chance to visit our country. We are a country with 276 million people, 17,000 islands, and almost 60% of people live in this small island of Java. We just moved from lower middle income country to upper middle income countries. We rank, this is the Human Development Index, you can see it here. The health expenditure in 2019 is around 2.9%, just to give you a context. And this is a report coming from the Hotsuite. I'm sure everyone, this is, they release this report on annual basis. So they have a specific report for each countries. As you can see in Indonesia here, cellular mobile connection is more than 100%. It means that some of the people in Indonesia have more than one mobile phone. Internet user is 77%, active social media users 60%. What's interesting here is that we spend a lot of time on internet, 7 hours, and on social media is more than 3 hours. And you can see that this is the top website that people in Indonesia is visiting. And on the right, bottom right, 92% of people in Indonesia using WhatsApp. So yeah. This is the report coming from the Ministry of Communication, Information and Technology on COVID-19 related hoaxes and misinformation. This data gathered since January 2020 until now. As you can see on the left side is hoaxes, COVID-related hoaxes that were circulated. And as you can see, Facebook is a platform that where you can find the hoaxes and misinformation the most. On the right side is a specific hoaxes and misinformation on COVID-19 vaccine. So as you can see, there's a lot of hoaxes and misinformation circulated during the COVID pandemic in Indonesia. The title is Digital Intervention. I would like to put what we did in the context. Are we really digital? Indonesia is a big country, but we are quite communal. I mean, even reading is not yet a culture. We are pretty much still in the oral culture. We learn a lot about behavior through songs, through games. We gather a lot. We have family gathering. We pray together. We share our food. We even ask our neighbor to taking care of our children. So I would like to put it in the context to basically share with you that digital intervention is not the only one, although we have quite a high internet penetration. We also need to understand the culture of people, because again, Indonesia is a country that is quite varied, and we have people living in the remote area as well with a very limited internet connection as well. I would like to share survey data that we did together with Nielsen. This is a periodic survey in 6 large cities in Indonesia. This is a face-to-face interview where the respondents are randomly selected. Total, there are 2,000 respondents from 6 countries. What I want to share is this finding from the survey. We found out that from our survey that around 40% people are quite susceptible to hoaxes, meaning that when they receive information through their mobile phone, through their social media, or from their relative in person, from their friends, they couldn't identify, or they couldn't differentiate whether or not the information that they receive is true information or is hoaxes or misinformation. This figure is quite worrying. I mean, 40%. And then what we see here as well, when people know that what they receive actually hoaxes and misinformation, some people are still intentionally share that to others. What we really want to see is for the graph to move to the right, where people are being more critical, active in reporting the hoax, or try to find information in the more credible source of information. And this is the finding on the adverse event following in immunization. Still one of the biggest challenge for people to utilize the COVID-19 vaccine services at that time. And if you can see the reason why people don't want to get the vaccine, the body becomes weak and we can get sick easily. For example, it can cause disability. It makes ourselves able to be monitored and cause dependence and must be used continuously. All of that, basically all side effects mentioned by respondent are heavily related to existing hoaxes and misinformation. On the right side, what's interesting is that although people receive the false information through social media, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, even TV, there's a two-step flow of communication here. When they're also exposed on the same hoaxes and misinformation through their significant other, their neighbor, their relative, their family, their parents, their children, it tends to influence their behavior more. So they trust the false information, and then they start to having doubt on the services that was promoted. So this is again a reminder for us that this is really important, not only rely to one type of intervention, but also to make sure that we also have doing a balance in terms of allocating our resource to, for example, to do also the community mobilization and engagement at the community level. So during the COVID response, we received some funding from different donors and some technical assistance. So we try to continue this initiative that has been done by our partners, including government and civil society. So this is the project goals, and this is the 3 pillars that we are doing, that we use as a strategy. Under the first pillar, we learned from WHO dashboard. So we trying to develop our own dashboard. And basically Liz is the one who come up with the idea and encourage us to have this data. So while we come up with, decide to develop this dashboard, first, we want to analyze the available data that we have to get insight, and then to have a visualization so it's easier to understand. As some of the participants rightly mentioned, not all of us are PhD or have a research background. Sometimes very difficult to understand the data, and the data visualization is really help to understand some of the information that we have. And we really hope that the data will become information and strategy for us to do action. In our dashboard, we have 7 sets of data, the UNICEF Nielsen periodic survey, but we also have data from Mafindo from their social listening. We have inoculation project data, and then we have data from the fact-checking operation. We have government MOH COVID-19 data, vaccination data, and also the routine immunization data. I would like to give you a bit of demo for you to get insight on what was in the data dashboard that we developed. I'm gonna move it forward so it's easier for you. So this is a different data set, and here you can see the type of information. Liz, I hope you're proud of us of doing this.
Very.
Under the Infodemic management, you click it, then you can see the vaccination data, and then we combine it, for example, with the hoax data, and then first dose, second dose, and then we also trying to link it with inoculation project data and try to have a more specific data based on province and all of that. This is still under development, but we're really happy that we finally able to do this. As Becky mentioned, we need to have the data ready to analyze, to put in one place so it's easy for people to access. This is the routine immunization data. So we really would like to hear more from the panelists here, and hopefully to get some technical assistance to make this dashboard more useful for us here for our response. Okay, I think I'll stop here. And then the second thing that we develop is the application. You have the dashboard for program people who do the intervention, but for public, it's very difficult for them, for example, to check the information that they receive. So we developed this progressive web application. We name it techhoax.id, where public can fact checking, they can report hoax, they can learn about digital literacy, they can join the community. So again, this is just finalized. We are now promoting it to our partners in Indonesia so that public can use it. This is the barcode. If you are interested to try the application, you can just scan it and try. And the other thing that we did is that knowing the fact that hoaxes and misinformation is circulated, but also learn from people who produce it. Is very appealing content. It makes people change their behavior. I think we need to learn from them to make our content for education, content for public awareness to be more appealing, to be more attractive for people to change their behavior. So we're doing with Mafindo, we partner, we're trying to get some insight from, again, the expert, from young people, healthcare workers, mother, but also the communication expert, and we come up with some engaging materials that now we are start to disseminating to our community. This is one of the materials, the TV spot that just finalized, I think last week, and we are disseminating it through national TV and also social media. I can play it later if you like, but I don't think we have time now. But again, the message that we use, the approach that we use is really coming from the insight that we get from the data that we have. I'm just gonna skip it for now. And on the second pillar, we want to have a more long-term kind of investment. Every day we see new hoaxes and misinformation, and we continue to address that. But we believe we need to also build the capacity of our community. And that's why we're doing this digital literacy training. When we say digital literacy, we're talking about digital skill, where people can basically understand how to interact on the social media, on the digital sphere, and then to talk about digital safety. For example, all the practical tips, for example, not to share your personal information, not to share your children information. And then ethic, it's very relevant to the, for example, online bullying and also other situation that happening on digital. So we use the IBC approach, something that is practical, fun, low cognitive, doesn't require a lot of resources. Basically, it's just like 45-minute session on the community. We partner with ICT Watch and also the Cominfo and our field office. And for the past 3 months, we have trained more than 100 trainers, 2,000 communicators, and we reach more than 85 people in the community with the digital literacy. And what it has been amplified as well by our CSO partners, including two largest religious organizations in our country, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, and they have reached more than 1.6 million people with not only digital literacy, but also message around the importance of routine immunization for children. The last pillar is the because everything happened at the national level, we are pretty have a much better coordination system now, but we have a lot of homework at subnational level in the province. So with our partner, Mafindo, we try to initiate the working group at the city level to basically allow people to discuss their issue, to map who's doing what, where, what kind of resource we have, and then to start discuss about a potential collaboration, and also to advocate the local government for them to support this initiative. This is our current situation. Back in 2020, when we do the survey with WHO, UNICEF, NITAG, only 65% people willing to be vaccinated with COVID vaccine. Even among healthcare workers, in the beginning, there's only 54% healthcare workers willing to be vaccinated. But with all the effort from partners, we are now in a very good condition where our first dose of COVID-19 vaccine reached more than 86%. Second dose 75%, third dose is still very low, 38%, and even lower on the fourth dose. But we are in much better condition now, thanks to all of the effort that all members and all partners has been doing. Thank you. I'll stop here. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Kiki. I think those are really great examples of how you're trying to connect kind of essentially the social listening and understanding people's questions and concerns and the misinformation and how you're plugging that into really thoughtful interventions. So Surani, I sent you a question to see if you wanted to ask Kiki one question before we go to our very last presentation really quickly. Otherwise, I can pull up the question as well. All right, well, I can go ahead and just ask. Oh, go ahead, Surani.
No, Liz, please go ahead.
Okay, so Kiki, so obviously, you have an army of people and many resources and a lot of partnerships to make all of this successful. What advice would you have to that lone infodemic manager, the person that's in a small but mighty team somewhere else who might not have all of these resources and all of these people to really connect those infodemic insights to SBC interventions? What would your advice be to somebody who wants to do something, for example, related to improving literacy, digital literacy, or address misinformation in the community, but they don't have the resources? What advice would you have for them?
To be honest, in the beginning, we also don't have that much of resource. I mean, when you were here, Liz, we have nothing. But then we connect with the organization, different individual who have the same concern, and some people doing all the work voluntarily in the beginning. But if you ask how we can start with collecting the data that you have, I think that will be a good start. Whatever data that is available for you, and then also start to engage different organizations, including platform. To be honest, in Indonesia, we receive a lot of support from Google, for example, also to work with other platform like Meta, and then to make government understand that this work is important and it contributes a lot into the success of the COVID-19 response and to the routine immunization in the country. And once the government understands that and they are willing to be part of it, they're willing to share their data, willing to share their resource and to support this initiative. But I think it's very important to understand that this is a big work. Everyone have a very limited resources, and collaboration is really the key. I mean, it probably sounds quite jargonistic collaboration, but really that's why we have this RCCE working group where different organizations fill the gap here and there and try to make things work in the country. Yeah.
As always, Indonesia is an inspiration to the rest of us about how we can do better in this space. So thank you so much, Kiki, for bringing the Indonesia experience and for inspiring all of us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And there might be more questions for you in Slido, so do check it out. And Kiki might be able to respond to some of those. And now for the last speaker, which is B.
You. So Liz, maybe I can introduce you. So,
Sure.
And again, hopefully my internet is gonna work well. So we did ask Liz to also talk, and actually the discussion until now and the presentations are a good segue into Liz's conversation. Before I discuss that, I'd like to introduce Elisabeth Wilhelm. She is co-author of the Infodemic Insights Manual together with me. This was during her UNICEF time. But she has been actually involved and has sponsored and cheered and worked in the global infodemic manager community, partnered with both WHO Infodemic Management Team, with the UNICEF immunization demand team over the years to promote social behavior change, and is pioneer in developing infodemic management related work, both tools, interventions, etc. So thanks, Liz, for agreeing to answer or try to answer the question. Well, now that we've built up experience and capacities the last 3 years or so, how do we now integrate this capacity and approaches into other health domains? We will skip Slido, but we actually have people in the audience who have applied similar tools to many other health domains, and I hope that you can discuss this during your presentation as well. So welcome to you, Liz.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Obviously, we've learned a lot in the time of COVID-19. When we first started doing Infodemic Insights, I actually was in Indonesia, and that's where the light bulb went on, working with Kiki late in the office, trying to help UNICEF and the government develop a really thoughtful communication strategy to address this new scary virus. We knew that the infodemic was coming. And so we've learned a lot in the last few years, and a lot of the capacity that has been built around the world has been incredible to see. Something like 95% of countries are now tracking health misinformation and COVID misinformation, which is a lot higher than what it was in January of 2020. And so now a lot of the tools, the resources, the humans that have been doing this work are now being asked to reposition themselves. Okay, great. We have gotten past the emergency phase of COVID. It's still a problem, but there are a lot of other health emergencies and other health topics that we need to address. So how do you reposition and retool yourself into these new areas of work? As Tina mentioned, a lot of you have already mentioned some of the different health topics that you have repositioned into, but it's not just health, it's also development. So UNICEF, when I was working with Surani, we were getting requests for, well, how can we apply this to nutrition? How can we apply this to child protection? So there's many different areas of social development you can also apply this work to. But just to get started, so you really can use the integrated analysis approach that's described in the manual for any health topic where there's noise or a very noisy information environment between what the recommended guidance is and the population that you're serving. And these are just 3 examples here on the slide. For natural disaster preparedness, the health guidance might be follow hurricane and flooding evacuation orders. I live in the state of Georgia in the United States. We sometimes get hurricanes. We're right above Florida. We need people to take that seriously when that type of guidance comes out. And so what are some of the challenges? Awareness, information voids, misinformation, people not believing that there's a Cat 4 hurricane coming their way and that they need to evacuate. So you want to think about, well, what are people's confusion? What is their level of awareness of, for example, disaster and weather report alerts, and when they need to take action? For e-cigarettes, it's really simple. Our guidance, especially to young people, is don't vape, right? There's a lot of information voids. There's deceptive marketing. There's a very well-funded tobacco industry that is advocating for vaping and for e-cigarette use. And so, how do we better address the information needs of young people, which are the same target audience for this type of deceptive marketing? When we're thinking about prevention of sexually transmitted disease, for pretty much any sexually transmitted disease, a guidance that you would find often is use a condom and get tested on a regular basis. But we know that there's issues around stigma, there are information voids and questions that can come up for different topics, especially around sexually transmitted disease. And so just to say that at the end of the day, your insights that you do through infodemic management and social listening should not replace deeper social behavioral assessments or health information-based analysis of a health issue, but it can complement it and it can deepen it. And there's many different topics where you can do this. We asked ChatGPT what they were, and here's the list of different health topics that misinformation, questions and concerns, and information voids are a substantive problem, and that you can use the manual to help really dig into some of these. And this will look different from place to place. This will look different for different contexts on different platforms and different populations. But just to say that there's many ways you can apply this far beyond COVID-19, and many you already have. Now, the question is, well, what do? You've built all of this expertise in the time of COVID. How do you now move into looking at a new health topic? Well, it's pretty easy. First, you really need to define, well, what's the new problem? If you're working in a health authority, you also want to be looking to health programs that are very strong, where they have the luxury of wanting to better address people's information and health service delivery needs. So that often means going to work with partners with health topics where there's funding and there's expertise and there's a desire to learn how is the information environment affecting a population. You need to consider what expertise that you need. It's probably going to be different than from COVID, right? If you're focusing on maternal child health, you might need to have a maternal child health expert. If you're focusing on malaria, you need to have someone with a malaria expertise. If you're looking at mental health and young people, you need to find experts on those topics. You also want to consider that different health topics and programs have their own data sets that you can use, and those might be different than what you might have used during COVID. You probably will have new partners. Kiki mentioned this, and really strongly, it's really, really important to build a network of partners, and we're going to talk about this in the second seminar today. But just to say that you will have a different set of partnerships that you'll need to establish and work through to be effective in this new health area. And then you also might have a different updated time frame. Many of us who are working in the COVID-19 pandemic were working fast. We were working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, trying to get out insights reports, to offer technical assistance and help wherever we could on insanely short timelines. When you're working on a routine health issue, for example, you don't need to do things overnight. You might, instead of doing an insights report every 2 weeks, you might be doing it once a month or once every 3 months. And so that also changes how you collect data, how you analyze it, and how you develop recommendations for interventions. And so these are just some of the things you want to consider when you are retooling or repositioning yourself from a COVID-19 perspective to a new health topic. It often just starts with conversations, talking to people in the office, talking to different programs about, well, what are their information needs and how well do they understand the information needs of their population they're trying to serve. There's also huge amounts of need here for emergency preparedness for every single possible emergency and hazard you can think of. So, and that's the kind of stuff you can start building now for the next pandemic and for the next outbreak. And so just to say that there's a lot here that you can take for experiences and learnings and apply them to new health topics. And my last piece of advice for all of you is document what you are doing, publish what you're doing, share what you're doing. There's networks, there's the WHO Infodemic Management Community, there's many different country level networks that where people are sharing their experiences of how to do this. This is a new area of work, it's a new area of public health, and it's a new area of academic inquiry. And so we will all do more and do better by the populations we serve if we share more about what works and what doesn't in this process. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Liz, very much for this presentation. I'm really sorry that we are actually running out of time. And if you don't mind, could you look through Slido and respond to any questions there? Because I'd like to move on to any last thoughts and reflections from Surani. And then we conclude the webinar and get ready for the next 4 topics in about 6 hours. Thank you, Liz. Over to Surani for any last thoughts.
No, thanks, Tina. I think, for me, it is more in terms of trying to continue this conversation with you folk, and try and see how we really make use of the tools that have been generated and developed, and to see how you're using it at country level for the work that you're doing. I think a lot of it also needs to go back to the focus on even, the annexes that we have in the document, and then appendix where, it is such a flexible tool that can be used for a lot of the areas that you're working on. So whether it is on a particular issue like zero dose, or whether it is on pandemic preparedness, how do you use this content to build the insights reports that can be actioned? I think one of the most important things that we really want to move towards is not the shiny insights report that looks really nice and fancy, but also how do you then connect the dots and take it to your communication response, use it in the communication response, so that you are able to better target your communication, better address the questions and concerns that are coming out from the field, and then really looking at the conversations that are taking place. And I think what is key is also to consider and to understand that when we say, insights generation, the need to look at different types of platforms, the data that you're getting from different platforms. So it's not only social media. And I know there were questions and comments on on Slido about AI and all that. Yes. So yes, that is one part of it. But then what are we hearing from the community, the work that we're doing at community level? How are we looking at those insights that are coming out from the community level, and then looking at integrating that analysis into our entire conversation and narrative in the insights generation? So I think it's building that case and making sure that we move it towards the response and using it in our communication response. So this, as Tina was saying, this is not the end of our conversation. We'd really like you to continue the discussions with us and join us in, taking this discipline forward and looking at what questions and concerns you have when you are working in this field. So let's continue chatting and send in your questions and comments, and we will keep in touch with you. And I think we'll probably have many more deep dive conversations. And if you want us to focus on particular areas, please do send that information to us so that we then know what you are looking for, and we can focus another webinar on things that interest you as well. So back to you, Tina. Liz, unless you have anything else to add, we can sign off. And then if you are still awake and if you're still around, please do join us for our next webinar in a couple of hours. And then we take it forward from there.
Thanks, Surani. So just last words from me. All of the presentations that we will be able to collect will be shared with you after the webinar. The recording will be available. Do join us, and I will share also in the email, follow-up email, also contact for Surani and for my team, so that if you have any follow-up or any suggestions, like Surani said, please do get in touch, and we continue working together and making connections. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you all of the panelists. Thank you, Sandra, for working diligently in the background. And we'll see you in a couple of hours if you're coming back for the webinar B. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See some of you soon. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Kiki. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Terri.
Thank you, everyone.